Hey folks, I got a request that a lot of you do not understand what I am talking about and what kind of web5. Some of people say that they don't understand the web3 too, and what is hell, and let's try to understand these things. So first of all, we should talk about the history and the time. But first we should have the explanation what the history actually are, and understand that time and history are subjective. And we used in a school that you have some periods in the history, that you have the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and all other things, and in some magical point of time, it's another time changed, and so on. But it's not how the history in reality works, or how the things in reality work. So in one society simultaneously could exist the groups of people that are living completely different time and believe in completely different ideas, and especially when you on the age of the new idea, you could have the people that practically live in a different society in a different time. For example, Russia right now, they in the 18th century, and they believe that they could conquer another country, grab somebody else piece of land because they can. And in the same time, we have the postmodernistic society of the Nordic folks that fight for the equality, and we have the Ukrainian people that fight all the time for the freedom, and so on. So you need to understand that history are subjective, history are bounded to the society context, and we're quite far from the topic. But what I mean that history is not the linear, it's more the spiral one. So you have the circles, and when you want to understand the history of the technologies better, I really recommend you the book Burn It With Fire. It's about the legal, old systems and how to rewrite them, but they have quite good introduction to the technologies. So my main focus in general, it's how the society interact with the technology, and how the society extend themselves and augment themselves with the technology, how they augment themselves with the devices, with the artificial intelligence, the future of the artificial intelligence agents, and so on. And here we need to understand that in the humanity, it's based on the communication, society, and how we interact with each other. And the other history goes to the point where we invent the language, after that we invent the written language, after that we invent the printing, and we find the way how to extend ourselves, how to externalize the ideas, how to externalize our brain, and all this begins. So if we will get back to the topic of the web, why the web2, web3 it's not so clear, because this terminology, even in the same group of people, have completely different meaning in completely different period of times, and it's quite interesting. But for me, it's the story how the human interact with the machine, and how we begin interacting with the machines, or through machines with other people. And for this we need to go to the practically 50s, and in the 50s, after war, it was couple of work of Konrad Zuse and so on. So we get the big machines that start doing something for us, and majority of these machines, it was the era of mainframes. Mainframes was on the ownership of some big organizations, probably government institutions or big business, and people interact with the machines through the terminals via the time sharing. So it was one big machine, people access this machine via the terminal, and it was a lot of custom software. It was the era of COBOL, and actually your interaction with machine was based on some time slots, and you have the access to this machine, and machine rarely talk with each other, or talk with each other with some files or with some custom networks, and that's it. So it was not so about sharing. It was huge machines that try to fit all the data that company owns. You have the access to it, and that's it. So I was born in a Soviet Union, so I had this experience that you write program by hand, then you go to the people that translate this program from writing to the punch cards, and in some period of time they execute these punch cards, but something happens in the middle, and you get a huge list of the printed text that you should understand yourself what your program is made. And you know, it was a completely different experience from what we have right now when we learn the stuff. But you know, so this era of the big machines, it was nothing to share. It was the custom protocols, and in the 60s, in the middle of the Cold War and the fight of US with the Soviet Union, the military folks together with the scientists gets together and realize that they need something to connect machines together, to exchange the data between the researchers, to exchange the data and create a network for the military goals. And it's how the ARPANET appeared. So the ARPANET was the predecessor of the internet. And this was quite important because of this Cold War, nuclear weapon attacks and all other things. One of the major idea of this ARPANET that it's highly reliable system that could survive when the part of system crash. So it should be quite autonomous, it should be decentralized, and it should have the qualities to quickly recover and be resilient when the part of the network just disappears. So as a result, we get something like TCP and IP and a lot of core systems and bridge protocols and backbone protocols of the internet somewhere in the 60s. But it was more about machine to machine. And it was about the exchange of the data between the data scientists, researchers, and the military folks. But it's already created the base that give possibility from one machine to another machine to exchange the data. And then the next interesting event in the history that happens was the invention of the personal computers. So the regular people get computers, and they was keen to use it, and they was keen to talk with each other. And it was another wave of the revolution in a network and communication, and a lot of cool things appear. So maybe you remember something like the FidoNet, that you call to some phone number, you connect to the guy, grab the data from the guy, connect to the board, read the news, and so on. So it was the era of these bulletin boards and all other things, way before the real internet as we know today arrived. And another revolution was the email and the SMTP protocol, where people get the identifiers, they could host their own email server, and it was new era of the communication between the people. But is it Web1? No, it's not Web1. The Web1 actually appeared when in 90s one guy in CERN came with the idea of the hypermedia and hypermedia text. So actually it's the HTML and HTTP. So the HTML and HTTP is a hypertext transfer protocol and hypertext markup language. It's the backbones of the web, or World Wide Web, or actually the web that we all know, because it was based on the idea that you could have documents that you could share with the people via the HTTP. And actually these documents, my main mind-blowing idea that they could be connected as a network. So you could have the link in one document that lead you to another document that hosted on another resource and so on. So HTTP and HTML, it's the basics of the web revolution. And actually the web with the bunch of the protocols like the hypertext transfer protocol, email services, time services, and all other things form something that we call the Web1 nowadays. So the Web1 was extremely democratic. You don't need to ask somebody. You could just have your voice. You could create your server. You could create your email server. You could publish the documents on the internet, and it was completely decentralized. But the problem is that it was complete nightmare because it was unreal to find something there. That's why this era of the early internet, it was a lot of this resources that tries to create some catalogs, tries to create some portals. Maybe you remember that you was the user of some big portals or websites that tries to create the catalogs of the data on the different topics and so on, and they was completely fragmented, and it was no good way to find something actually until the 1996 or some point where the Google actually appeared. And the Google actually changed the internet completely, and it was something that we call the Web1, or so it's the www and the web network and the web pages, but something before web pages exists as a FidoNet and so on. And what happens then? We get the term of the Web2. And the Web2 usually presented with the Web3 community as the evil of the companies that take our freedom, grab our identity, and so on. But it's not really true. If you will read a bit what the Web2 mean, this term appeared in 2004 on the Web2 conference. It was invented by O'Reilly, and this guy came to the point that, you know, the Web1 was the internet of the static pages, where it was extremely hard to the user to contribute and have their voice there. And the Web2 is the internet of the platforms where users have really low pay to have a voice. So it was the era of the platforms and era of the social networks, where we turned from the internet of reading the content, where it was extremely hard and technical to write the content. Yeah, so you could own your website, but you need a server. You need to know a lot about the technology, the publishing, to know the HTML and all those things. But in 2004, it was some kind of revolution where we get some platforms and social networks and social interactions and so on, where you could go to these platforms and create the content practically without any efforts. So it was the era of the internet of writing, that the people just self-create the content, create the social-driven economy, completely new way of interaction with the content, that you could immediately write the things, comment on the things and so on. And you know, this movement was in the 60s and 70s too, with the different technology, but right now it was accessible with the regular people that just have the browser, and that's it. And you know, it was the point where we switch the freedom over convenience, because it was super easy and nobody thinks about to whom this content belong, who own the data, who own the identity, how it will work in the future. And we never expect that in some point of time all these good things with the platforms and the easy way of creating the content will turn against us, because right now these companies, they control what we see and what we read, because amount of information is so huge that right now what we see controlled completely with the algorithm that form our newsfeed. But the Web2 was not something bad, it was something that was created by the big companies. You know, Google is the big company. It's arrived in 1996 or 1997, and they changed how we interact with the internet. And without Google, I don't know how the history will develop. You know, the Facebook was not something bad. The Facebook actually created the social network. LinkedIn was the first professional social network that never existed before, and it was completely different way how the people interact with the internet. So these companies create the backbone of the new way of interacting, new way of creating the content. But they create the problem that never existed before, that in some point of time we need to own our identity, we need to own our content, and right now is the ownership of these companies, because it's their platform, and it's the main conflict of Web2. But Web2 itself is not something bad, it was just an evolution based on the companies and the business sector, because actually the business had the money and they try to have more money. And then we talk about the Web3. Actually, the Web3 is quite interesting thing, because the Web3, it's not the Riot movement of the free people. No, it's yet another company that was behind the Ethereum network, that bring in 2014 the whole story of the new free internet based on Ethereum network. Oh my God! You know, so we get the blockchains, and blockchains promise us to solve all our problems, but it's not true. And together with this Web3 concept from the Ethereum folks, we get this cruel story of the bad Web2 folks. And it was always comparison of the Web2 against Web3, and you know, it's completely broken concept. And you know, the Web3 itself is completely misused term, because everybody have completely different ideas what the Web3 should do, what kind of features of the Web3, and so on. So the main narratives of the Ethereum folks, because they decentralized transaction focused network that bring something new to the game. If you compare the Ethereum with the Bitcoin, they bring the programmable economy and the smart contracts. And smart contracts was some kind of independent agents that could do some actions on behalf of you, or could change the interaction of the humanity with the network and so on. And you know, so the Web3 in the core, if we will refer the Ethereum folks, it's mainly about the blockchain, and it's mainly about the programmable economy and decentralization. And they explain it that it's somehow we returning back to the good old time of the Web1, where everybody was equal and so on. But you know, it's yet another Web3, it's yet another marketing term of the people that try to sell you some piece of technology. I'm not against of the blockchains. Blockchains, it's really big game changer. In some areas of tech, they are really good. In some areas of tech, they extremely bad. And for example, why they extremely bad? So they extremely slow. They locked the user and user identity to the network, and they try to build the world of the self-contained things. So what I mean, that if you build in the smart contract, you have no way to interact with things outside the network. Then you need the Oracle, chain links, some super weird technologies to connect you outside the network with the outside world. And that's the problem. And it's lock your data in a network. And the problem of the blockchains that your data is mainly public data, and the blockchain's data is more oriented to the transactional data. So because the Satoshi document and all his revolution with the Bitcoin was more focused on the decentralized economy and self-managed autonomous systems based on crypto that actually changed the financial system, but it's hard to apply to everything around, yeah, because it's hard to apply to data that have privacy. It's hard to have this identity inside blockchain that maybe could be reused outside of blockchain. Yeah, so the Web3, it's a best used term, everybody understand it's differently, it's mainly about the blockchains, but I propose to take a different perspective, you know. So Web1, it was something that you read the content produced by the limited amount of people. It was read mainly network. Then we have this Web2 that read and write and all other things, but it was already interaction of the humans and the content created by humans and so on. In some point of time, we came to the point that network, we're not alone in this universe, and I'm not talking about the aliens invasions or the Martians. We bring our device together with us. And we get the problem that right now in the internet, we need to make something that make the internet accessible not only to the humans, but to the human devices. And we need to make this internet understandable by machines. And it's bring us the new topic of semantic web and interconnected data, and how we could bring our devices that will interact with the humans and extend the humans, and how the devices will understand the network. And we get the semantic web, we get the new completely domain that have new technical challenges of the IoT devices, and together with the devices we get the new challenge completely of the amount of the traffic, amount of the data. Imagine the smart house and the sensors and so on. But together with the amount of the data and semantic web, you see it's already two big topics. We have the third topic, how device could identify itself, how the human could identify itself, how we could distinguish the device from the human, and how we could connect that it's Volodya and it's his iPhone, it's his device, it's his smartphone and his smart house and so on. So in some point we get the problem that we should have the network where the devices coexist together with the humans. Humans extend themselves with the devices, and all this network of devices and humans needs to have the identity. And the internet was born without the identity layer completely. You simply don't know with whom you speak in a network, because we simply don't have the identity protocol. And it's the problem that was promised to be solved in the blockchains, but unfortunately blockchains haven't solved this problem. And that's why people get together and try to solve the problem of identity, and they try to solve the problem of the ownership of the data. But it was the huge movement in 2020, before the COVID. It was the huge movement of the self-sovereign identity and identity community and so on, but not so big success, I would say. So if you still look in my video, you know, you puzzled this SSI identity guy, he always talk about this stuff, why it's matter and so on. I hope that you're still with me, because right now we came to the point of the web5, and if web3 was completely about the blockchain, web5 was yet another marketing stuff that tried to sell you some kind of technology. Was invented by the TBD folks, and Jack Dorsey is the founder of the Twitter. Actually, it's on this movement, so it's his company. And what they do, they get some good things of the identity and SSI concepts, If you're interested in an SSI, watch my videos, subscribe to my channels, follow my articles on Medium, follow my articles on Yakihon. But they get this idea of the portable identity and ownership of the data and owned data, and all these ideas from the SSI they try to pull to the network agnostic environment. So it's not about the blockchains anymore, and it somehow tries to create the layer in the internet with the identity and the persistent storage. So they combine the identity via the DIDs and the persistent storage with new concept of the decentralized web nodes. And it's network agnostic, so it's not depend on blockchains, it's not depends on anything. You could co-host everything or self-host everything yourself, but the Web5 give you the set of protocols and open technologies to own your identity, to own your data, and create the new kind of exchange and communication protocols that exchange this data with other people in a new way, where we could say that it's your network, it's your device, it's Volodya itself, and it's his iPhone, and so on. And it was quite interesting idea, but not so much adoption, because the freedom and the ownership have a cost. You need to be more technology deep, you need to take care about your data, you need to take care about your private key. If you look in me on the Yakihon platform article, so you have the Noster key, and you have your Lightning Network handle, so you should care about the security of your private key, because then you will have a problem. And you know, it was not so much about the Web5, because it's hard to convince people to care about their identity and the data. But then the big shift in the universe happens, and this big shift is the generative AI and independent AI powered agents. So it's more interesting. So we had the internet of the humans. After that, we get the internet of the humans connected with the devices. Then it was internet of the humans connected with the devices that was working through the platforms and other providers. So it's the Web2, and now it's internet of the humans and devices that have ability to interact directly via the Web5, because they have the possibility to manage the identity and data and exchange data freely. And right now we have the AI that actually it's yet another extension of you. It could do the actions on behalf of you. It could independently do something, analyze the information, interact with even each other. You could have two different artificial intelligence agents that could talk to each other and decide something on behalf of some different people or different groups of people, and they all need identity and they need all the data exchange. And actually right now we have the big challenge how to identify the authentic data created by humans and authentic data created by AI and a bunch of other things. So right now we have a need of the data aware, identity aware networks, where we could create the networks of ourselves and identify our agents and manage them and manage our devices together with our agents and so on. So, and we have this era of the new internet, of the interconnected devices and humans extended by artificial intelligence, and still haven't solved the problem of identity. And actually Web5 tried to solve this identity. I will be honest with you, we have the Web7, it's not so popular, but we have this term, and I will just make you aware that the Web7 actually it's the yet another self-sovereign identity concept that proposes us that instead of IP addresses, we have the decentralized identifiers that are cryptographical proof identifiers, and we could exchange the messages in the same way how the TBD folks propose to exchange the messages between the decentralized web nodes. It's not so popular idea, but it's practically the similar idea to the Web5. So Web7 is just yet another SSI protocol on top of the decentralized and the identifiers, and it will be more. It will be more web something, but we need to understand that we have the couple of the things. We have the couple of the problems that we haven't solved, and we need to solve it in some extent. So we want to have the network where we could coexist together with our devices. We could coexist together with our artificial agents. And all this should have the identity, and all this should have the ownership of each other and their own data that they are producing, because it's not possible anymore to shift this responsibility to the big companies, because unfortunately when the big companies control these data flows and the identities, they have a tendency to make money on top of it and start controlling you instead of allowing you to control them. And this is a long conspiracy story, but you know, when we summarize in a short, so all these terms like Web2, Web3 was and Web5 was invented by companies that try to solve you some kind of technologies. Not all these companies are bad. Some of these companies try to do something good to you, but we all need to solve a couple of problems together, and it will be more different webs. All this Web5, Web3, Web2, Web1, Web7, and Web10, they coexist in the same time, in the same universe, because it's the different level of solving the problems simultaneously, and society working this way because a lot of different historical groups coexist in the same time, and it will be more. But the future is the combination of the humans, devices, and artificial intelligence that should have some possibilities to interact with each other. So sorry for the long story. I will try to make the article for you about this. If you have the questions, or if you want to talk more on some particular topics, let me know. I will be happy to have a chat with you. See you.